Navigating 21 series, which is a series of online talks and masterclasses covering a range of topics to help you navigate 2021, an interesting year that we've had, starting off, leading from 2020, and to help you navigate beyond that and to support your creative career. So today we're going to be focusing on getting into theatres, and we have some amazing panelists as well who are going to be talking about that subject with a list of questions, and also at the end answering some of your specific questions as well. But just a bit of housekeeping first off. We'll get that out of the way, the boring stuff out of the way first. So just to let you know that this session is going to be recorded. When you came into this session, you should have clicked on "It's okay to be recorded," but just to make you aware, it is being recorded and it's going to be put up on our website after this event. If you want to watch it again, you can. Hello to everyone who is watching it in the future. Nice to have you too. But yeah, just so you're aware, it is being recorded. You're welcome to have your videos on if you want to keep your videos on, but you're also welcome to have them off. That's fine, but we will ask you to keep your mics off unless we have said that you can ask a question later on, and there will be opportunity to do that as well, but we'll keep them off for the time being. Obviously, that doesn't go for the panelists because we want to hear from you guys. Any questions, if you have any questions during, then you can put them in the chat box. If you have any technical stuff, you can put that to Laura in the chat box if you direct that to her, and she's around for the whole of the session to answer any of those kind of queries or to help you out if for some reason the internet gods betray us and you get locked out or something like that. So there will be opportunity towards the end or the second half where you get to have your questions answered. So please have a think of those. You can put them in the chat whenever you want to. But yeah, have a think about whether or not also you want to ask them personally and turn your mics on and stuff and put them in the chat as well, because it would be lovely to hear from some of you with your cameras on. So I think that is everything. Is that everything, Laura? That I was sorry.
I think I did say about there's subtitling. If
there is subtitling as well. Thank you so much for reminding me. So we have subtitling on this event. If you go to the more dots at the bottom of your screen, if you'd like to use the subtitling, you just need to click on that and then click on show subtitle, and subtitles will come up for you if you require them. So my name is Olwen Davies. I work at UKNA Artists. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm wearing a grey jumper and I have long brown hair, and there is a lot of books in the background that are fairly distracting. And now I'm going to introduce you to our wonderful panelists who I'm really excited to be talking to today. We're really, really lucky to have such an amazing group of people to talk to, especially when theatres are opening on the 17th and they have a lot of work to do. So we are super lucky. First off, we have Beth Shouler. Beth is a theatre director and theatre maker, as well as head of creative programmes at Curve in Leicester.
Hello, do I describe myself?
Yeah, if that's okay, Beth.
That's right.
Sorry, I got the order wrong then.
That's all right. I'm Beth. I'm a director. I'm head of creative programmes at Curve. I have long brown and grey hair, and I'm currently wearing a grey jumper, and I'm sat on a grey sofa.
Thank you, Beth. Sorry, we did that in a slightly wrong order. That's my notes and my arrows there. I'll own up. Then we have Teunkie Van Der Sluijs. He is a theatre director and creative associate at the Young Vic.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Teunkie. I go by he, him as pronouns. And I've got long dark hair, which is tied back in a ponytail, and a beard, which is luckily still mostly dark, but increasingly grey. And I'm sat in my study with floor to ceiling bookshelves behind me.
Thank you so much. And then we have Laura Guthrie. Laura is Artist Development Manager at Graeae. Graeae champions the inclusion of deaf and disabled people in the arts.
Hello, hi, I'm Laura. My pronouns are she, her. I'm white with large brown circle glasses. I have short blondish greyish hair, and I've got a pink and red jumper on today. And behind me on my wall is the outline of the world painted in gold. And it's very nice to be here.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you. Then we have Sam Beckett. Sam Beckett is the Artistic Director of Purple Theatre. They celebrate non-binary values in race and gender through performance and art, but Sam also acts, writes, directs, and is a performance poet. She also runs Century Theatre in the East Midlands.
Hi, thank you, Olwen. My name is Sam. My pronouns are fairly fluid. I am a middle-aged mixed race person with dark curly hair, which is piled on top of my head, black rimmed glasses, red lipstick. I'm wearing a green cardigan and a green leopard print shirt, and there are a few books behind me. Thank you.
Thank you. We're also well read. Or do we just like to display them, I think. Fantastic. So then we also have Ruby Glaskin. Ruby is the co-founder and producer of Milk Presents, who are a queer artist-led company making live performance, but also across art forms, so multiple art forms.
Hi, so nice to be here. Yeah, I'm Ruby. I use she, her pronouns. I am a white person with pink hair, dark rimmed glasses, wearing a grey cardigan and a nose piercing, and I have a mainly white background, but you might see the occasional picture depending on where I move my body.
Wonderful, thanks, Ruby. Then we have Ralph Thompson. Ralph is a producer at Battersea Arts Centre, which is famous for supporting people who take creative risks and who are working on pieces that are a bit more inspiring change locally and nationally.
Hi, my name is Ralph. I am a white male in my mid-30s. I'm wearing a white t-shirt with a kind of light shirt. I've got brownish hair, and I've got probably the least interesting background. I'm currently in one of the meeting rooms at Battersea Arts Centre, and my pronouns are he, him, if I didn't say.
Great, thank you, Ralph. I would disagree. I feel like you're in a sci-fi film. Your background, yeah, which is incredible. I'm really enjoying it. So last but not least, we have Hannah Stone. So Hannah Stone is a theatre maker, director and creative producer who is interested in work created by women with three-dimensional, funny, playful female protagonists. She's artistic director of the Gramophones Theatre Company. She was also a member of the Freelance Task Force in 2020 and is currently a producer for In Good Company, and Hannah has just become Nottingham Playhouse's most recent associate artist, so which is incredible and amazing. Hannah is going to kick us off today, telling us a bit about her career, how she's gotten to the place where she is, and then we're going to start on the panel discussion. So Hannah, whenever you are ready.
Thanks, Olwen. Yeah, I'm Hannah Stone, she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman in my late 30s with dark brown hair, blue glasses, grey t-shirt with a collar and a green cardigan. Yeah, as Olwen said, I'm a theatre maker, director and producer, and I've been making theatre for 15 years in various guises, predominantly running the theatre company, the Gramophones, and primarily making work that puts women centre stage. I'm basically just going to talk a little bit about my career and things that I think hopefully will be useful in terms of what kind of got me to where I am now. So I started out as an actor, but I quickly realised at university that I wanted to make theatre as well as perform it. I went to Bretton Hall, which is in the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and the course was very creative, and we did a lot of devising. We went out into the sculpture park and we were sort of given a sculpture and said, devise a piece of theatre in response to that. And I'd never experienced anything like that before. All my experience was in youth theatre with quite traditional plays. So kind of that just really just got me excited and kind of made me feel like I wanted to make theatre as well as perform. After uni, I did quite a lot of theatre in education, so going into schools and performing kind of issue-based work, which some of which was brilliant, some of it which was not so great, but there was a lot of that kind of work around then. I don't think there's, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's as much of that kind of work happening now. But I did that for sort of 2 or 3 years, and then kind of just got to the end point with it really, and got a bit frustrated that I wasn't really doing what I wanted to do, which was making theatre. I was just performing and kind of doing other people's work that sometimes was questionable in terms of quality. So I decided that I wanted to kind of take control and set up a company myself. And I'd recently moved to Nottingham and kind of basically got a group of women together to start making work. And it started very much as a kind of meet up once a week on an evening to kind of experiment and play and just see what happened. We basically made a short piece, which we performed as part of a festival in Nottingham. There used to happen an amazing festival called Hatch, which was just a fantastic festival that took over different areas of Nottingham. For example, the one we did was the whole street. So there were performances in bars, restaurants. I think there was one in like the nail salon and the tattoo bar. And we did a performance in a restaurant of a comedy show called Anything to Declare. And as a result of that, basically we were really lucky that Kate Chapman, who is an amazing director and producer, saw that piece of work. In fact, she was just about to leave before we'd started, because we were doing some pre-show sort of activities, and she was about to leave, and I kind of collared her as she was about to leave the room and said, "Oh, we haven't started yet, don't go yet." And so she stuck around and watched it, and was really positive about it, and kind of supported us to put in an application to the organisation that she was running at the time, to kind of develop this piece of work and to kind of develop the company and the work that we were making. So from that, like, somebody seeing our work kind of gave us that first sort of kick off into being supported and sort of getting some money so that we could actually kind of take it more seriously. And we developed that show with their support, and we took it to the Edinburgh Fringe, which is hugely difficult, I think, for artists, especially artists starting out. We did 11 nights in the Free Fringe in a tiny, tiny cafe, which I think we managed to cram 40 audience members into. And we slept on someone's floor. Like, we were a lot younger then. It's not something that I would be able to do now. But when we started out, that was just about possible, but it was still incredibly difficult, and financially incredibly difficult. But I think, obviously, Edinburgh Fringe is a great place to get people to see your work, and there are lots of other opportunities other than the Edinburgh Fringe now. And I think, obviously, the way the world is at the moment, the great thing about digital is that it opens it up for people to see work without necessarily having to spend a lot of money to go to Edinburgh or to another Fringe festival. But my kind of key learning out of that was to get people to see your work. So if you are starting out and making stuff, inviting people to see it, and even if you feel like it's early stages or it's not ready, you know, as long as you're upfront about that and you say to people, like, this is where we're at, we'd love you to come and see and tell us what you think, it's starting those conversations up, and it's starting to get your work seen by people. And I think even though it might feel quite vulnerable to do that, like it's great to have professionals see your work and support you with it. And most people, if they can make something, they will. If you invite them and they're available, they'll come. So that really helped us kind of start off. Edinburgh, we got some good reviews, and we got like some key people to see our work, one of whom was Chris Kirkwood, who was running New Perspectives at the time, and a lady called Karen Steadman, who runs Creative Arts East in Norfolk. And both of those were loved our work and wanted to help us again develop to the next level. And Chris Kirkwood sat down with me and basically helped me to write an Arts Council application. We were accepted onto a mentoring program, and that was part of it. It wasn't just like randomly out of the blue. We were being supported and mentored by them, but it came out of him seeing our show. And he also put our show forward for rural touring. So we've done a lot of touring into small venues, village halls, community centres, which has been amazing, a fantastic experience. And so that kind of him seeing that work then meant that we got paid bookings. And that kind of kept growing from there, really. Getting funding obviously is a huge kind of point at which it meant we could develop our company. So we applied for a funding bill, our first one, about 10 years ago, to develop the company. And that involved developing 2 pieces of work that we had been working on, and then to do an R&D on a totally new piece, and to be mentored by New Perspectives. So that bid was really key in kind of me particularly learning how to run a business or run a company, because it's one thing wanting to be a performer and wanting to make work, but to actually be able to do the organizational side of it is a totally different ballgame. So that year that we had that funding and that support from New Perspectives was really key. And so I think, if you can apply for mentoring schemes, or if you can get somebody that you admire to mentor you and to help you with things. And also, I'm going to come to this a bit later, but just asking for help with things. If you feel like you don't understand how to do something, how to do a funding bid, or how to write a press release, whatever it is, asking for help. Theatres particularly in this region, I think, are really supportive of artists, and obviously have artist development schemes that you can tap into and you can ask for help. So if there's something you need help with, do ask for it. In terms of how we got into theatres, which is obviously what this kind of discussion is about. As I've already mentioned, people seeing your work, and that doesn't have to be live. That could be a video, it could be a promotional short video, it could be online, it could be sending a script. There are lots of different ways that you can get people to engage with your work. So that's one way, and a lot of bookings for our first few shows came out of the Edinburgh Fringe. As we've kind of got older and have more responsibilities, we haven't done the Edinburgh Fringe for a good few years. So now what we basically do with our work is, when we do an R&D, we'll always try to make a promotional video and get some high quality photographs. And I'll basically sit down and send hundreds of emails out to venues that I think would be suitable for our work. So I'll look into other shows that they have on. Do I think that they would fit with this show? Or I'll look at another theatre company that is maybe slightly similar to what we do, and I'll look at where they're touring to, and I'll send it out to those people. And it takes a bit of detective work to kind of find the right programmer. It's taken me many years to kind of compile a big list of lots of programmers, and they do change as well. So you really have to keep on top of it, and it does take time. But we get a lot of bookings that way. We get a lot of interest from things that we send out. And obviously having a really strong pitch as well is really important. And I think that's about knowing what your show is, what it's about, like why you're making it, and what's unique about it. And I think doing that in a sort of short, sharp, exciting few sentences, an image, a video. Programmers at venues, I'm sure Beth will tell you, are incredibly busy, and to be able to sort of see something quickly and easily and just click a link to access a video to kind of get the gist of what kind of show it is the best way to sort of send those things off. And then I guess people probably talk a lot about this coming up, but funding is obviously a huge thing to kind of getting your work out there, and funding gives you the freedom to make the work that you want with the people that you want to work with, and make it about the things that you're passionate about. And obviously you need kind of allies, you need people within the industry who are going to support that. But what the great thing about funding is it kind of means that you don't feel like you're constantly knocking on the door. You can do your work with the money from mainly from the Arts Council is where we've been funded, often under 15,000 project grants, and occasionally over 15,000 project grants. But that's kind of really given us that freedom to not only to pay ourselves, but to bring in amazing artists and to bring in people that are experts in areas. So for example, during the pandemic, like many others, we had to adapt, and we had to we ended up making an audio piece, which is not something that we would have probably made had it not been for the pandemic. And we've obviously got no experience in making an audio piece, so we brought in an amazing sound designer who had those skills and that experience, and getting the funding allowed us to do that, to make a high quality piece of work. And the other thing with commissions as well, so with venues that might invest some money in a project, again, it's about sending that out to the world in whatever way you can, and mostly the way we do that is again through emails. And I might put a short PDF, it might be initial idea, I might put a short PDF together with a few lines about what the show is, some images that reflect the kind of style of show, and be like, do you want to have a chat about this? Or we're looking for funding for this, might you be able to support us? And that the commissions normally come out of a more developed relationship. So people that have maybe booked our work before, or we've had conversations with, or we've run workshops with. So commissions that we've had have kind of come out of those things. It's unusual that I would reach out to a venue that we've not had anything to do with and say, can you give us some commissioning money? Obviously there's the kind of open process where you can apply for commissions, but I think on the whole we've probably got a lot more commissions and bookings through me going specifically to venues rather than applying to things. That's I found that more successful. Another thing is just to be around, so to like go to shows, to go to meetings. At the moment there's loads of things on Zoom, you know, for example in East Midlands, like the Ingle Company big Zooms, the Nottingham Playhouse run regular Zooms, so going to those, meeting people getting to know who you are, and also asking to have a cup of coffee with somebody. If there's somebody in a theatre that you think is amazing and that you would love to work with, like say to them, would you have a 20-minute cup of tea with me? It's a hard thing for people to say no to. It's 20 minutes out of their day. So that would be my one of my top tips is ask for coffees, be cheeky. And then I just wanted to mention a bit about touring right now. So obviously things are very up in the air with COVID. But I'm happy to say that we have a tour booked now for October, and fingers crossed it'll go ahead. And people are paying, I would say, the same guarantees that they were paying before the pandemic, from my experience. But I have also been doing a lot of reflecting, and it'll be really interesting to hear what some of the other producers think. A lot of reflecting at the moment about touring and how unsustainable it is for small companies. Doing one-nighters quite often, small fees relatively, it might cover the costs of the show. Well, it should cover the cost of the show, but it never covers the costs of your overheads. So your storage, your insurance, your rehearsals, your design fixes, remakes, all those things that you still have to do, the fees don't cover that. So one of my kind of provocations really is about how we make touring more sustainable for small companies. at the moment we always have to apply for subsidy when we tour our work, because I literally just did the budget and was like, we've got the best guarantees we've ever had, surely we can cover everything. But when you actually put it all into your spreadsheet, you go, oh no, we still need 10 grand essentially to make this tour happen. So I would love to hear anyone's thoughts on that, particularly producers in the room, on how we make it more sustainable for small companies to tour. That was me. So I hope I haven't babbled on for too long. And I will have to go, but I'm hoping to come back because I have a small child downstairs who is demanding of my attention. But it's been lovely to talk to you all. And if anyone has any questions for me, if I don't manage to come back, feel free to drop me an email. I'll pop my email into the chat. So if anyone wants to ask me a question or ask me for a cup of tea, then that would be lovely. Thanks ever so much, Olwen.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for that. That was amazing. That was like a jam-packed information. I don't know what to call it, but it was amazing. There was so much information in there. So I hope I think people will have to watch that back and be like, yes, this. So much amazing stuff in there. So thank you so much, Hannah. And it's a really great publication, which I think we'll go with the question I was thinking of kicking off with first, but then I think we'll come back to that publication, only because I want to hear a little. I think it'll be really lovely to hear a little bit more from the other panelists and for them to introduce themselves a little bit more, and then we'll get into the kind of questions for the artists and also those really interesting publications. So hopefully, Hannah, when you come back, we'll come back to that publication, which will be really great to explore, because I'm really interested to know that too. So I'm going to open it up to the panel now, and we're going to start the panel discussion. And the first question that I had for the panelists, I'm really interested to know what your journey into theatre was, especially as creative people or as producers. What was it about theatre that really drew you in to choosing to work in that industry? What was it that kept you working in theatre as well, possibly? But also, what are you working towards at the moment now? What are you working towards now? And then we'll go to some of the other questions. So I wondered if, Ruby, would you mind starting us off?
I knew you were going to come to me first. Yeah, fine. Happy to. Yeah, I mean, I guess what I think the answer to all of those sub questions within the question for me is people. I really enjoy working with people. I really enjoy understanding people, and I feel like theatre and performance has always been like a vehicle for doing that, for seeing different narratives, different identities, for working with lots of different people all the time, meeting new people, working with people, the same people over and over again, and how those relationships change. So I think for me, that's always been a big driving factor, and so that's probably kind of initially why I was drawn to working in theatre. And yeah, I mean, I initially got into it through I grew up in Brighton, and there's a big arts festival here every year, and that's why, arts and culture is so important. I was exposed to lots of different performance fairly young because of this festival that happens in my city every year, and I was very lucky to be in a city where that happened. And I think that for me was a huge pull to see sort of big parades with loads of amazing costumes, or to kind of see just jugglers in the street, or just anything that was performative. To have that once a year was an incredible touch point to be sort of thinking, oh, that's something that people do. Oh, okay, that could be something that I do. So yeah, a big advocate of arts happening in everywhere across the country, because I think unless you kind of see that regularly, it takes you, I think it would have taken me a lot longer to figure out that it was something that I wanted to do. And then, yeah, I mean, I had probably a fairly conventional, fairly privileged route into theatre. Went to studied it at A level, and then went to drama school, Central School of Speech and Drama, where I did a kind of alternative performance course called Performance Arts, which looked a bit more at sort of live art, interdisciplinary practice. And as part of that, we produced a festival in our second year, and that kind of got me into producing and started to make me think that I think, like a lot of people, I sort of started off performing and thinking that I wanted to be on the stage, and then actually realizing that actually I didn't know if I really wanted to do that. And yeah, that kind of insight into producing that I had at uni was like a way of going, oh, there's other roles that I can do that are actually just as integral, that also is part of, you know, for me, producing is about people and is about bringing people together and making things happen, and yeah, bringing the right teams together and thinking, okay, that's a brilliant project, where would that go, what people would enjoy that the most, or what venues, or all of that. So yeah, I think I sort of just discovered that I really enjoyed that side of things, and then from that sort of met the two other people that founded Milk Presents with me, and literally in like the final months of uni. I didn't know them before then, and one of them wanted to take a project that they'd put on in third year to take it to Buxton Fringe, and was basically recruited my entire house to just say, hey, do you want to do this? And we took this show out to Buxton Fringe. I think we camped on the side of a hillside with no facilities, I think for about £2 a night, and did this kind of really wild show where we all got covered in wine at the end and had no showers to wash it off because we were camping, and all of that sort of kind of thing. So that's sort of how Milk Presents began, and then yeah, just sort of have grown Milk from that, which was just over 10 years ago now, and alongside sort of also developed an independent producing practice. And I think kind of where I'm thinking of going now is, I think kind of, I'm thinking a lot about what the industry needs, what needs to change, what we need more of, what we need less of, and thinking like where my place is within that, where is Milk Presents' place within that, how can we be bringing up other people along with us, and how can we be kind of making sure that actually when I reflect on my journey into theatre, I think it does follow like a fairly conventional what I would say sort of middle class white route into theatre, and sort of how can we challenge those routes, how can we keep making theatre something that lots of different people can do. So yeah, that's sort of a real snapshot into sort of how I got into it and what drives me. But yeah, I'll move on to someone else.
That's lovely. No, it's great to hear where everyone is coming from, and then also what you're thinking now, which I think is really important, and some of the things you've kind of already touched on, and some of the stuff that hopefully we're going to get into a bit more into this discussion. Laura, would you go next?
Hello, yes, I'm happy to go next. Hi, I'm Laura. So my route I currently work at Graeae Theatre, which is a disabled-led theatre company, celebrating its 40th year this year. But I've actually only been with Graeae since April last year, so I'm a real newbie to Graeae. But I started my kind of route into theatre almost the opposite reason to Ruby. There was very little theatre in where I grew up. I grew up in Cheshire, and the town where I was, there was very little. And this is going back in the 80s, because I'm quite an old bird. So I guess for me, a lot of it was about rebellion and rebelling against the fact that my family were all accountants and doctors and things like this, and I just didn't want to be like them. So I went down the arts route, and a really important marker for me was the opportunity to work with a company called Horse and Bamboo Theatre, who I think they're still around now, but they were a theatre company based in Lancashire who did a lot of touring work using a horse and cart. And I had the opportunity to do some work with them, creating a piece of theatre for Manchester Cathedral, and I was only 18 at the time. But it was just a magical experience, working with this group of people who were to me felt so otherworldly, this sort of bunch of roaming artists that came to the college I was at and said, hey, does anyone want to make some masks? And we made these masks using highly toxic chemicals, and this is in the 80s when that was okay, in a workshop where people were smoking, and it was just, you know, but to me it was really magical. And we created this show, a promenade piece in Manchester Cathedral using full head masks, and I just got bitten by the bug. I just loved working in a creative team. I loved making something that people could enjoy and talk about and so on. So that led me to do a theatre design degree, which I did at Nottingham. So I got into theatre into theatre making through the design side of theatre. And similar to Hannah, when I left, I joined up with a couple of other graduates, and we created a theatre arts company. And also by that time, I'd gone back to Horse and Bamboo and done another really important piece of work for me in terms of how it shaped me, which was an immersive piece of work in a foundry in Rawtenstall, which was designed specifically for adults with learning disabilities to come and become completely immersed in a piece of theatre and a story. And again, I just had an absolute ball, and living and working in an old foundry in the middle of winter in the back of Lancashire was really uncomfortable, but it was very formative for me. It showed me that theatre was many things. It wasn't just a proscenium arch, it wasn't just a black box. It was somewhere where you could really create magical and totally imaginative worlds that people could get engrossed in physically, you know, that they could physically explore. And I absolutely loved that. So and I just kind of, since then, I've worked for various different organisations and worked as a freelancer as well. But predominantly my work has been alongside other disabled artists, other disabled performers, theatre makers, directors. Often they're learning disabled performers, but I've also spent a lot of time working with deaf and disabled directors and theatre makers. And I think for me, defining myself as a disabled theatre maker is absolutely key to the work that I do and the work that I want to produce. And for me, it's about being able to be part of telling stories that are so hidden, and working alongside other people who have had some similar and some very different lived experiences to me, but together we can create stories and create experiences which are accessible to a broader range of people. So I've worked with companies like Carousel. I worked in an inclusive dance company as a performer for 7 years, which was an incredible experience. I worked for East Midlands Shape, where that was more about project management and creating projects for other deaf and disabled people to take part in. And I spent 14 years working in local authority as an arts development officer, which was great in lots of ways. It taught me lots, for sure. And more recently, I've been working back as a freelancer, really supporting other people to ensure that the work they do is as accessible as possible, as well as running a small theatre company, which is called Meander Theatre. And Meander Theatre is really about ensuring that we provide professional level theatre making and theatre experiences for learning disabled adults. And then finally Graeae, where I'm working as an arts development manager, supporting new, young, and also not so young, but new deaf and disabled artists who are trying to develop their careers. So I think that's enough about me.
That was amazing. It's amazing to hear all about the different projects that you've worked on, and also your real development of focus and what you really find in, like, the ability to find what really interests you in your work, and also what your focus is in terms of adding to our ecology as well. I think it's really amazing. Beth.
Hello. Hi. So how did I get into theatre and where have I got to now? I think, like most people, I just loved drama at school, and I did ballet, and I loved that too, and it was where I felt happy. And school was horrendous and I was quite badly bullied, and I went to a local youth theatre, and that was a real escape for me, which I think is quite common actually in the arts. I hear that story a lot. And we got to do big musicals, which were really fun, and I was usually a dancer in the chorus, like everyone else. But it was a really great time. And when I came out of that, I went off to university, and I kept applying to do English. And Leeds sent me a letter saying, do you want to apply for theatre, because your personal statement just says that you're really into theatre, basically. So I had an interview for that course, and so I went to Leeds, and it was great because it was a really broad education around making theatre, and I did everything from classics to restoration comedy to learning how to work a lighting desk to site-specific theatre. So it gave me a flavour, and it let me really play in different roles. And actually, I think that kind of broad education has been really, really helpful all the time throughout my career, where I didn't specialise too early. I think, like most people, I really, really wanted to be an actor, and it took me quite a while to reconcile myself to the fact that I am incredibly mediocre at acting. And I think also at that point, it sort of began to emerge that probably I was more of a leader. Not that you can't not be a leader and actor, but I think the way my brain works is quite organisational, and it's quite what could happen, how can we make this happen. It's quite, which is sort of a producery bit, but more about what does this thing look like. And when we were telling a story, I was always more interested in the bigger picture of the story rather than the kind of individual story that journey that an actor goes on. And that became more and more kind of, that sort of emerged. And I stayed on and did an MA, which in many ways I regret, because I think if you want to do an MA, it's worth waiting to really know what you want to specialise in it and really rinse it. And I think mine was quite general. I was 21. I made some really amazing site-specific stuff, but like now I would look back and go, you should have used that as the start, as a springboard for your career. And I didn't. And I didn't know how to do that. And the university didn't really know how to support me in that. So it kind of left me in a bit of a weird place of having lots of skills, loads of creativity, but I hadn't really found my people. I didn't really know what to do with that. And actually at that point I wasn't very well, and I went back home and then got involved with loads of other stuff and was doing loads and loads of youth work. And then I kind of segued back into the industry via doing youth theatre, which seemed a nice mixture of like the education I had and the fact that I was working quite a lot with youth funding team and various of the young people, and that was brilliant because I began to direct youth theatres. I set up a company with a friend in the end. I was working for various other theatres. And the great thing about working with young people is they just really go on a journey with you. You can really explore practice and creativity. And I think that was really formative in understanding how I like to work as a director. I flooded studio floors. We made work in the woods. We did like adaptations of classics. I did new writing, and then I got involved with NT Connections at the National Theatre, which was really helpful, and they gave you loads of free workshops around directing, and that was quite a journey. And then from the back of that, I basically began to ask a couple of directors if I could assistant direct, and I got to assistant direct at Lakeside Arts Centre in Nottingham and Nottingham Playhouse, but I had to do it for free, and that was really challenging because I couldn't really afford to do it. And I think the industry's changed quite a lot because this was quite a while ago now. But yeah, it was, in one sense, I was really privileged and I could do it and I had the opportunity. In another way, I just remember the stress of it, of trying to make ends meet and live independently and turn up to rehearsals and be meaningful and useful as an assistant director. But that was really formative. And then from there, I was offered a job at Theatre Hall Plymouth to go and be a staff director in a new post they'd set up that was kind of doing all their kind of young people and community stuff, and they've got this amazing theatre. And actually that was where I learned how mid-scale theatre is made in organisations and buildings, because up to that point I just did everything. Like I can learn how to work QLab and design a show and do costumes. Sure, I can do everything. And I think that was a real shock, was going from being an independent freelance, sort of quite early career director, but quite established practitioner, suddenly going into this environment where there was an expectation that I would just know how to run a production meeting, or that, you know, of course you should know how a tech runs. And that feeling of terror that I just didn't know stuff was quite acute. And I think that has really stayed with me, is all the things that you do as you're an artist that people expect you to know stuff and you don't know, and you feel too intimidated to go, I've no idea what I'm meant to be doing right now, please can you help me? But also it was incredibly supportive theatre, and they taught me loads. So I was there for a couple of years, and then I went off to London to work for Kiln Theatre as their young company director. So I kind of segued in via, and that was the first time I'd worked in London, which was a whole culture shock as a kind of regional artist that was fairly established by that point regionally. And then from there, I worked there for a bit, and then I came back to Nottingham and was freelancing all around the country, directing kind of small scale shows, as well as sort of much larger work with young companies and a kind of community companies. So I was working at the Almeida, and then I was working at Nottingham Playhouse, but I was also doing bits for other people's companies and rehearsed readings and that kind of portfolio career you have as a director. And then Inga Company gave me a really good break as a mid-career commissioner, and that was quite significant in terms of taking me seriously at this, kind of felt like I'd hit a wall career-wise, and I just couldn't quite get over it as a director. And that gave me real confidence in my career, but also it made me realise how little I knew about producing and how much I needed to know. And my big advice to anybody in the industry is do a producing course, save up for it, and do something that just gives you the overview of how producing works. I am not a natural producer, but I have learnt more in the last 3 years than I ever expected to. And it has given me so much agency to do my own work and to support other people's work. And then while I was doing that, a job opportunity came up at Nottingham Playhouse. And I suppose because I felt really passionately about how difficult this career, particularly if you're a regional artist, had been, that doors seemed to open for no logical reason, others seemed to slam in your face, and that it seemed to be like a game that I didn't understand the rules. And it seemed a really lovely opportunity to start looking at that kind of the infrastructure around artist development. I'd done quite a bit instinctively down in Plymouth, and I'd set up a fringe festival down there with some friends and done quite a lot of, we've been quite entrepreneurial and just looked for the gaps and made stuff. And it felt like a really nice time to collaborate with a building and go, what could an artist development programme look like, and what might this region need? So I was there for a bit, and then I moved to Curve as their new work associate, and I began developing new work, which was a real amalgamation of like dramaturgy, having a director's brain, having a kind of bit of a talent scout bit of my brain, and an ability to kind of project manage and produce. And it was, so I worked really closely with Nikolai. I'm going to be like reading scripts, meeting kind of big musical theatre producers, talk about possible projects, and then also be in rooms with very early career artists working on their work in a real sort of hands-on, how does the plot work in this? What does your audience want kind of way, which I found absolutely, like, I just love the breadth of really all these different types of work. And also Curve was bigger and than many of the places, and I got to see how some of the much larger scale work got made, and I've learnt loads. And then this year I've segued into being head of creative programs, which is where we've kind of pulled together all the strands around community and young people and universities and artist development, and are looking at how do we connect this and kind of integrate it much more into the broader programme of the building. And we kind of pull down all those lines that go, you're a community artist, you're a participant, like how can we blur all that so that people feel able to come into a process? So that's kind of where I'm at the moment, where I've sort of segued out of directing and sort of into a specialist area around artist development. And I kind of work with a number of artists around the country who are all beginning to specialise in, and it comes from quite a passionate place, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. No, that's really great, and it's really wonderful to see the trajectory and actually of all the different kind of places that you've worked as well, and also across the areas of the country as well. That kind of trajectory as well. Teunkie.
Yeah, gosh. So I think there are two answers to the question about my journey into theatre. And on the one hand, there's like, you know, the actual physical journey and all the stuff I've done, which I won't actually go into too much detail about, partly because if you want to know about that, you will probably be able to find some of those online. But the more I work, and my role at the Young Vic, I guess to some extent I work in a similar capacity as to what Beth was just saying. Although I don't really work so much with our community and outreach programs, but I do a lot of work with artist development. And the more I work there with both early career and mid-career and established artists, the more I think that apart from your factual biography, the thing that really matters to artists is your emotional biography. It's how the experiences you've had have built you, have shaped you into the artist that you are. And that is the thing that I'm interested in hearing when I talk to artists about the work that they want to make. You know, to pick up from a point that Hannah made in a beautiful introduction, when you pitch work to venues, when you try and establish a relationship with them, and especially when you're talking about a particular project, of course, be able to talk about what the story is and be able to talk about what the themes are that you want to explore. But I think most of all, be able to explain why you are the artist that needs to make that piece of work, what it is from your own particular experiences or background or interest or proclivities that you feel you want to explore there. Because like a biography or a CV only tells us so much. You know, it won't tell us the artist's vision. So I guess how I ended up in theatre was, you know, and it's still, I don't know, I'm still understanding why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I've been doing this for, gosh, 15 years or so now. And I think it will keep changing over the course of my career, and in fact, I think it should. But I mean, to some extent, I followed a fairly straightforward, I guess, career path, if there is such a thing for directors. I did a degree in drama in my hometown, Amsterdam, then moved to the UK, where I went to drama school to train as a director. I went to Rose Bruford College when that still had a directing program. And then I followed the sort of established path for emerging directors, which is doing assistant directing and eventually going to resident and associate directing. I got into a trainee scheme for directors at the Orange Tree Theatre in my first or second year or so out of the industry, and became a staff director at the National Theatre. And alongside that, I was doing my own shows in pub theatres in London and sort of touring a little bit. But because I've got this this sort of dual background in that I've always had one foot in the UK and one in continental Europe, I've always worked in both places. And I think that it's artistically really fed into my practice. And that what I brought back from the UK to Europe was that sort of tradition and craft of actor training and of writing that is so well developed in this country. And I think what I brought from Europe to here was a more experimental dramaturgical outlook and a more visual approach to making theatre. So I often work with quite sort of pronounced visual aesthetics and visual metaphors. And I've got close working relationships with a couple of designers where like they write the show with me as much as the writer does, I like to think. And that eventually led me to a place where, you know, after about 5 or 6 years or so of like self-producing work, and that, you know, self-producing means doing everything yourself, essentially, from driving the van to to designing the artwork for the posters and all of that. And then I started to get to a point after a couple of years where I was being asked to come in and direct for existing companies and for first regional theatres. And then just before I started at the Young Vic, where I've been for the past nearly 2 years now, I was freelancing mostly in Europe, and I directed for International Theatre Amsterdam for one of their associate companies. I did a long trilogy of sort of shows there. Although I've always been sort of based in the UK, so I've been doing a lot of sort of hopping back and forth. But to come back to my first point, it's you know, all of those factual things are, you know, of course they've shaped me. But like my journey into theatre, I guess, has really been about trying to find out what I wanted answered in my own life. And for me, that's, you know, it's been looking for the sense of community that theatre gives, the sense of understanding why people make the decisions that they do, understanding what social structures are behind that, understanding what the politics are behind that. And I don't necessarily mean politics as in a sort of, you know, political parties and manifestos and sort of placards and banners kind of stuff, but more about like how does the structure that we've chosen to organize our society, how does that influence the choices we make and the chances that people get? And I guess because of that, I've often been drawn to and often been asked to direct work by writers and with actors from the global majority, and that sort of led me to a logical place to be employed by the Young Vic, where I've now been for the past 2 years. So that's kind of been my journey in a nutshell.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think it's really important to reflect on what we are drawn to in terms of theatre. And I think there's a real strand that's running through everyone's kind of trajectory, which is really linking about community and people, and that being a really strong focus. Sam.
Hello. I suppose my journey is different in that I'm from a very working class background. I fell in love with theatre when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. At primary school, I was in I don't know, I think it was Aladdin or something. And you know, I mean, I was desperately shy at school, which I now know was due to my, you know, being neurodivergent and having communication problems. And for some reason, having been pushed onto a stage in front of people, suddenly I felt at home. And I didn't have to be me anymore, because I didn't really like being me. I could be somebody else, and it was fantastical, and it was, you know, it was heightened reality and or just complete fantasy, and absolutely loved that. So I kind of moved between England and the States quite a bit, but still tried to get on stage as much as I could. Managed to get my A-levels. Unfortunately, we couldn't afford drama school or anything like that. So I ended up going to a college. Wasn't even a polytechnic back then. It was a college of higher education, and which is now University of Derby, actually. And I did a business course because, you know, there's no money in the arts. What are you thinking? You need to go to work and you need to, you know, support your single mother and the family and bring in some cash, you know, buy a car, do stuff. Don't be flouncing around the country, you know, trying to be something you're not. So, yeah, I did that. And for probably 10, 15 years, I just did a you know, fairly pedestrian job. I still did amateur theatre because I loved it so much. And it just kept speaking to me, you know, my soul needed something other than what I was doing. So I decided I'd managed to, you know, get a bit of money behind me, and I was in a stable relationship. There was, you know, 2 incomes, whatever. Decided to go back to university and pursue my dream that I put on hold for 15 years. And of course, back then, you know, I'm talking in the early 90s, the theatre that I would very occasionally be able to afford to go and see, nobody that looked like me was on those stages. And I didn't feel as though, you know, it was a big leap to think, what makes you think you can do that on stage when actually it's those people that do that, it's not you. And then I suppose, you know, 15 years later, the landscape is changing. You know, you're seeing more people on the television that look like you, and your stories might be being told in, you know, distant sort of quiet corners. So I thought, right, listen, I need to go and do this. So I went back to university to do theatre studies. I went to Derby. I did my first year at BA, and then got pregnant and ended up having 5 years maternity. I had 2 children. Still loved theatre, really enjoyed theatre, and thought, gosh, I really want to go back to university again after all this time. It's like, you know, I'm in my mid-30s by this time and thinking, really, what do you just, oh. So I actually was doing a lot of work for free with local companies, just, you know, from the local amateur theatre group. I'd met like an independent filmmaker who said, oh, come and do some acting. So I was just, you know, doing it for fun, really, just doing a bit of acting here, there and everywhere. And then one day that same person that I'd done quite a lot of free stuff for said, actually, I know a job coming up with a producer friend of mine who wants some office work doing. So went and did like 1 day a week in a mid-scale touring theatre company, which led to 2 days a week, you know, really enjoyed being around creatives again. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've spent all these years not doing this. This is what I really love doing. And I did that for a couple of years and then started thinking, actually, the work they're making doesn't speak to me. It's not, it's just, it was really commercial. It was only about, you know, or what can we put on that's going to make a bit of money for the company. It's not about what they were passionate in or nothing like that. And I really wanted to make theatre about stuff that I was passionate about, you know. So I ended up leaving there and I joined Derby Theatres. They had an ensemble group at that time where you could just go, like, you know, just audition and just, it was like youth theatre for adults, I suppose. It wasn't, you know, we just went every week and we had loads of fun and it was great. And I met Sarah Brigham and some other wonderful people, and that really spurred me on. And I did actually at Nottingham Playhouse, I was in the community chorus of, Beth will remember this. Do you remember Grapes of Wrath when that went to Nottingham Playhouse? I was in the community chorus and I met this wonderful actor who said to me, why don't you just start your own company? What are you doing? What's the matter with just do it? And I was like, what do you mean just do it? What do you mean just do it? And, you know, with a lot of blood, sweat and tears and crying over my Arts Council bid for months and months before submitting my first one, because, you know, I hadn't managed to reach out to In Good Company or any of, I was just me and my own at a desk trying to write my first ever Arts Council bid, and just remember thinking, feeling like my heart had been pulled out of my chest and smeared all over the pages. Sorry if that's triggering for anybody. Yeah, started my own company, and then it was hard. It's really hard if you haven't got money behind you, if you know, if you don't know people. I know Hannah was talking, and you know, if you don't know people, opportunities don't tend to just come knocking on your door. You have to get out there and put yourself out there, and you'll do a lot of stuff for free, and it's hard to juggle a job because you've got to pay your rent and, you know, wanted to do stuff. But if I can do it, anybody can do it. And, you know, I'm nearly 50 now. I run my own theatre, not my own theatre. Who do I think I am? No, I run a theatre for the local authority. You know, I'm now associate artist at Derby Theatres, one of their big projects they've got going on. I'm doing a PhD in contemporary theatre and absolutely love it. And this is, I'm so glad that I went back and followed my dream, because it's just home for me. And yeah, follow your dreams. I'll shut up.
The main lesson, it was a brilliant lesson for the whole of this talk. Follow your dreams is a great one, and I think it's really important to talk about those different routes as well, because not everyone's route is one that you would expect, and some people's paths like they're not the same. Not everyone goes to university necessarily, or goes to university at the time that you expect, or people change their course as well. Always find it like so crazy that in this country, at least, you're almost expected to know what you want to do when you're 16 or 18. And like, I think of how much I knew then, like of anything, and you think, but thank you, Sam, that's really brilliant. And last but not least, Ralph.
Hi, yeah, it's really interesting to hear everyone else's story. Mine's probably not actually as interesting, but I kind of feel like I fell into producing as a bit of an accident, and I feel like lots of producers I talked to kind of didn't start out thinking they were going to be a producer, but kind of fell into it almost by accident. I grew up in London and obviously had like lots of stuff happening around me, and had an older sibling who would take me to come and see things in London. I was always interested in kind of theatre and performance that was happening outside of venues. So I had like early experiences of going to see companies like Shunt at London Bridge and Punch Drunk and people like that, and kind of got interested in that world. I then went to study at Goldsmiths and came out of that after 3 years having absolutely no idea what I wanted to do and feeling pretty lost and useless. And then like over the next kind of 3, 4, 5 years after that, I just got loads of odd jobs, mainly doing shift work. So I did front of house jobs at several venues. I worked in the staff canteen at Tate Modern for a year. I worked doing all sorts of odds and sods. I did little bits of stage management, little bits of production assistant work, and I just sort of, through that and volunteering, so I volunteered at lots of different festivals. I volunteered at Lift Festival in London, at Arts Admin at the Place. I just kind of, over a few years, accumulated lots of kind of friendships, mainly with people that I'd met, and through that I kind of gathered more and more kind of bits of work, which ultimately ended up me getting sort of regular freelance work with Punch Drunk, doing all sorts of odd things, looking after their props warehouse, doing a bit of assistant stage managing, doing a bit of production assistant work, and I did that for 2 or 3 years, and then got a job at BAC, and I've been at BAC for about 6 years. So it kind of, I fell into producing. I sort of arrived at my interview here for a sort of producing coordinator role, saying that I knew what I was doing, which was, a complete pack of lies. I had no idea. I remember on my first day, them asking me to do some stuff with a spreadsheet, and I'd never really used Excel before, and I was like, don't worry, and I sort of went into the toilets and watched a YouTube video about how to program Excel spreadsheets. So I sort of kind of made it up a little bit as it went along. I never wanted to be a producer. I'm still not sure if I want to be a producer, but I have always been attracted to theatre and kind of and performance and live art, and particularly work that happens in unconventional spaces, in unconventional buildings, with work that kind of sits outside of sits outside of sort of traditional theatre practice. So yeah, and I guess what has drawn me to Battersea Arts Centre is that it's a crumbling old town hall with kind of all sorts of structural problems, but half the building burnt down 5 years ago, but it has this huge kind of like resilience and community spirit, and lots of strange things happen here, and people, it's a sort of testing ground for people who want to make different kinds of performance work. So yeah, in a way I've kind of grown up professionally here, and I suppose what my main interests are at BAC is working on kind of making the venue more accessible. So over the last 3 years, I've been working towards making BAC the first ever relaxed venue. So every performance that we do at BAC is relaxed, unless there is a reason why it shouldn't be. We have access provision across every single show that we do. All the work that is developed at BAC considers access from the inception. So we try and embed that kind of thinking in the way in which all work is developed here. And we're also trying to work more to now, which we're shifting our focus towards financial accessibility. So we've just announced that we've become a pay what you can venue, which we're hoping is going to go all right, and not everyone's just going to spend a quid on a ticket. So far it's gone really well, and we're trying to make BAC more accessible for people, and from sort of lower incomes, and we're also trying to make ourselves more accessible for artists as well. So we're trying to reshape all of our kind of offers and all of the pathways into this venue, try and become more transparent, and more kind of accessible for early career artists and freelancers who want to connect with us. So that's what I'm kind of interested in, and that's what I'm working on at the moment.
Excellent. That sounds really exciting. All the that kind of trajectory and everything that you're focusing on now it's really important, and it sounds really exciting. I'm quite conscious of time, and I'm hoping you guys are all good for time. We're gonna, if it's all right with you, we're gonna hit some questions hard now, like just to try and get through as many as we can, and then open it up to people that are in the session. Please do, speed round, like Ruby just said in the chat. Please do, if you do have questions, put them in the chat box. Otherwise, I might keep going through my own if people don't have questions. But please, if you do have them, put them in the chat box, and I'll make sure that we have time for them towards the end of the session. So the first question that we have is, what do you recommend to artists who are unsure of their true focus in the industry? So maybe they are someone who's multi-passionate about loads of different things. What would you recommend to somebody who wanted to progress, but they're not quite sure exactly what in yet? But they know that they want it to be in theatre and in the arts, and they like creating things. I'm going to ask Teunkie to kick us off with that one.
So the short answer is completely and fully embrace that. That is wonderful. There is no longer a need to pigeonhole yourself as one thing. I am a writer or I'm a director. And we're increasingly seeing, and I'm very glad that we're doing this, we're increasingly seeing a world of multi-hyphenated artists, hybrid artists who work across disciplines or in between disciplines or who switch discipline. In fact, one of the aims for our building, the Young Vic, is to facilitate this more and more. We're also aware that partly that's, economic necessity, but actually the thing that I think is very liberating about it is it puts you in a position to choose the best form or the best format for the story you want to tell. So the best advice I can give about it is don't fret about it, embrace it.
That's wonderful, thank you. I would agree as well. Beth, you can just say I agree as well, by the way. I know this might be like, I don't have anything to add to that.
No, I totally agree. I think the thing I would add or just follow on is it's about the work. It's about the story that you want to tell. And I think one of the things when you work in artist development for a while is you begin to realise is that I sometimes get frustrated because I have endless conversations about career trajectories, but actually not about the work. And I'm most interested in the story. What do you want to say? How do you want to say it? And who do you want to say it to? Who is it for? Because then you can work out where you sit in position for that once you've got that. But that's the bit that's the most exciting bit, it's the work.
Yeah, excellent. Sam, did you want to add anything?
Not just try everything, I think that would be my, dip your toe in all manner of stuff.
see what happens. Yeah. Great. Ralph?
Yeah, completely agree with what everyone's already said. I think like keep your options open. I mean, I guess also you will naturally find like what you are good at. If you dip your toe in a lot of things, you'll find out, like me, for example, I'm a shit stage manager, but I've got skills in other areas, so it's like keep your options open, and I don't think you need to have one focus necessarily.
Yeah, excellent. Cool. Laura?
Yeah, agree. It is about just relaxing into it's about relaxing into the belief that you're doing something you enjoy, and one experience will naturally lead to another, and you will find if there ever is a single path, you will find it. But I entirely agree. I've tried lots of different things, and some I failed miserably at, and others I've spent a whole day grinning like a Cheshire cat because I've absolutely enjoyed thoroughly what I'm doing. So yeah, just allow yourself to just try things and believe that it will lead to other things.
Yeah, cool. Ruby?
Yeah, agree. And just to add that I think if you are a sort of like multi-portfolio artist, or you have lots of different interests and skills, like I think it can then sometimes feel when if you're applying for something that is for writers or is for directors, you can sometimes have that kind of imposter syndrome of like, oh God, but I don't know if I am a writer, like I do this as well and that, and just sort of like try to block out those thoughts when you have those sorts of different disciplines, because you can look at everyone else's CV and think, God, they really are a writer compared to me. So just sort of like if you're embracing that, also make sure that you give yourself the credit that just because you do other things doesn't mean you're not one of those things fully as somebody else as well. But yeah, agree with everything else.
Yeah, thank you. That's really great. That actually was really helpful for me. I do that all the time. That I'm like, oh, but I'm not really that, but I'm not also this. So that's really fabulous. Thank you. So on to the next question. So we've got, how can an artist introduce themselves to local theatres and get involved in the local network? So what are the ways that you would recommend for that? Sam, I'm going to ask you to kick off because you were talking a little bit about this before, and then we'll whiz round everyone. Yeah,
I mean, it takes time, and you have to have the privilege of having time on your side. So, you know, if you haven't got to work 12 hours a day to pay your rent, then you can sit down and look up every theatre in your area, follow them on Twitter, Instagram. There's always stuff coming up, and yeah, loads of opportunities, but you do have to do your homework. Nobody's going to come and knock on your door.
No, sadly not. Cool. Ruby.
Yeah, I think Hannah said it in the beginning, like just sort of like making yourself known, dropping emails, going to see work, going to different events that they're running, just kind of being present. But like Sam said, that takes time. And also, you know, I think something I've learned over the years, especially, I feel that there was a lot of emphasis when sort of we were beginning with Milk Presents, and we did a couple of different sort of development programs, and there was a lot of emphasis on like, you know, yeah, really do your research, make sure that before you even approach a venue about touring, make sure you've seen a show there, and all of this stuff that actually I look back and I think, God, we were all working like 3 different jobs, and then we were expected to go around the country on our own finances to go and see a thing just before we felt like able to say to this theatre, oh, like, please, could we talk to you about our work? And actually, I think, of course, like everybody starts somewhere, and we all have to learn, and we all have to build relationships and networks, but actually like value your own self and the work that you're bringing, and have that confidence and value when you come to those conversations and when you say those things. And like, it's okay if you haven't managed to go to that venue, or it's okay if you can't get to all of their networking events. Like, I think as long as you have that sort of yeah, that kind of clarity and confidence in what you're doing, and that respect for the people that you're talking to, then actually like don't worry if all of that isn't possible, because we're not all superhuman. And yeah, I think kind of keeping that at your heart and not beating yourself up about the fact that you haven't been to their press night or whatever is okay. Like, it is fine.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure to go to a lot of events, a lot of networking things, which sometimes just isn't possible for some people depending on their finances. Laura.
Yeah, I think that was my first thought, actually. When I read that, I thought, oh God, that fills me with dread, because for a lot of people, doing that kind of networking and cold calling is really tricky, and not just, you know, for some people it's just totally inaccessible. And so I think what Ruby said about just kind of really focusing on what it is that you have to offer a local venue, and also, do you have to stay local? Is there another venue where you have a better connection for whatever reason it might be? You might have a better connection because of the type of work that venue does, because there's a person at that venue who you've met and you felt comfortable with. I would say it doesn't necessarily always have to be what's on your doorstep. It's the place that you feel most suits what it is you want to achieve with your career, or that day. Doesn't even have to be in the bigger scheme of things. And yes, totally agree with Ruby, that whole kind of issue of a concern around having to be everywhere and having to be seen and having to can be really overwhelming. And when I first started in my career, the avenues for communication were tiny compared to what they are now, but in many ways much simpler, because it really was about going to places physically and just sitting in a coffee bar with people and soaking up the atmosphere and getting to know people at a much slower pace. I think at the moment we can get into this idea that everything has to happen quite quickly and instantly, and it doesn't.
Yeah, take your time a bit more. I think if anything, the pandemic's teaching us a bit that, isn't it? Which is a good thing. Ralph, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Ruby said. I mean, like, I guess the one thing that I would say, like, almost to counter it a little bit, and I'm sort of bit like, yeah, I'm not sure if it's the right thing to say, but I like working at a venue, we get a lot of people writing to us with ideas and with projects that they want to develop, and we set aside, you know, like 3-4 hours a week to kind of go through the inbox and look at all of these emails and respond to everyone. And it's amazing, like, the difference it makes when someone writes something just like a little bit personal. Like, it's when someone says, hey, really interested in the work that you do at BAC, or like blah, 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 we're interested in talking to you because X, Y, and Z. Because, you know, often what we get is people will find an email on the website and cut and paste a kind of a long email and just sort of like keep throwing the email at you, and you sort of like, you know, have to gently say, look, you know, we're not a circus venue, or we're not a kind of we don't specialize in this, that, and the other. And like, and even though we're always happy to respond to everyone, I think if you that a small kind of like personal kind of connection, or like anything, yeah, just a thought as to like why it is that that particular venue would be like a good place, that slight acknowledgement of that makes a huge difference for you in terms of like how you can respond to like an approach from someone. And also, don't feel guilty about taking people's time at a venue. Like, venues are funded by taxpayers' money, so, you know, we're all paying tax to pay for wages for people to work at venues. So don't ever feel like guilty about finding someone's phone number and like just calling them up, or like sending them loads of emails. Like, it's producers at venues' jobs to do that. Like, yeah, don't be apologetic about it.
Yeah, sometimes it's and it's also, it can become a fun game trying to find people's personal emails. Not personal emails, like,
yeah,
I mean, they're work ones, because sometimes they're not on there, but then you're like, the game of working out what it could be if I know what the email handle is. Maybe that's just my fun game that I like to play. Teunkie, did you have anything to add?
I think Sam's point is so important, though. It's like, it can really feel overwhelming to feel you have to be everywhere, and there are huge considerations there for, like, it's costly in terms of a time investment. It's costly in terms of, you know, tickets. And so I think, like in my situation, I now live in Manchester, but I finished drama school and I lived in London. So local for me was, I mean, that's a pretty big local. There's a lot of theatres there. And I think so when you just start out, it's always worth looking at what sort of free, subsidized, easy access things are there, like at the venues you find interesting. So for instance, at the Young Vic, for the 2 local boroughs that we're in London, we make available a certain number of tickets for free for people who are in those boroughs. And then we cap ticket prices as well, so it hopefully remains affordable. But I think the most important thing really is, like, it's okay to not be at everything, but you can still, and you should still, do some research into the place. Like, we are not expecting you to have seen everything that we produce. God, no. What we are hoping you can do is explain, just like Ralph said, why you are interested in us. Like, it's not about having seen everything, but it is about knowing why you think there's a connection between you and the venue. When I started, I knew that I wasn't going to do writing from before the 20th century. I was interested, and still am interested, in contemporary plays. So there were loads of organizations that, like, there was no point in me wasting my time writing to them and them wasting their time reading my letters to them. So, you know, it's okay to go, maybe that thing that's most local isn't just not for you.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable point. And actually, we did have a question on here, which I am going to skip because of time, but also just because you mentioned that, Teunkie, of how artists might find the right organisations for them. And it is really just about that research, which was mentioned, about the venues, but also thinking about what you want from the venues as well, and thinking if actually it matches up, because just because it's close to you, it doesn't mean it necessarily is the right fit for you. And then identifying what you want, what you're interested in, and if the venue is the same, if it's a partnership that is, you know, like a relationship, if it's going to work out because you're both interested in the same things. But Beth, did you have anything to add to that?
Just that if you're not sure who to contact, just send a general inquiry and it will get sent to the right person in the building. In all the organisations I've been in, random inquiries have found their way to me eventually. Secondly is that be really clear about what you want. I think we sometimes get overly concerned with networking and relational stuff, and actually we are an industry and a business, and it's completely fine to go, I'd like to meet to talk about my play, or I'd like to meet to do this, or I'd like to pitch to you, or, you know, it's actually the more clarity you have about what you want, or being clear about the fact you don't know what you want, can actually be really helpful as a starting point for a conversation. And if you get into that conversation, I would say come prepared, like come with a bullet point list of things that you ideally want to make your project happen, or that you want to know about, or questions you've got, because people's time is quite limited, and I wish it wasn't. I think the more that you can do to get the most out of that experience, the more useful it will be to you. And we desperately, the buildings I've worked in, want to be useful, and we want to make beautiful, brilliant work with really talented people. So when I sit in conversations where somebody hasn't really thought through, and I can see they're trying to work it out, it's quite frustrating, but it's hard to see what I can do. I feel a bit impotent in that regard. Whereas when somebody comes with quite a forthright ask, it's like, okay, you've got a list of 86 things, I can give you those 3. Great, done. I think being quite pragmatic is really, really helpful.
Yeah, I would agree. And I definitely have been that artist that's gone places where you go, I need to introduce myself, because I need, like, that's what I've been told. I need to be introduced myself to these organisations. And then you go in and they go, what would you like? And you go, oh, I don't know, I just came to introduce myself. I didn't realise what the next stage was. And I definitely have been that person. I wonder if, Beth, this next question, if you don't mind kicking us off, and I guess we can team some of this together, just from what you were just talking about, which is when meeting possible partner organisations or venues or people you're hoping to work with, what are the things that the artist should prepare? And Hannah mentioned before an elevator pitch, and what do you think would be good things that were in this elevator pitch, if they did have one? But what are the kind of things that you think would be super useful for an artist going in?
Okay, so 2 things there. So one is about a pitch and one is about a meeting. They're slightly different, but they can be the same thing. In terms of your pitch, generally I would say, and I can't speak for every organisation, but I really want to know what you want to give to an audience. I really want the audience to factor in that conversation, because the work we make is for other people. So that's really important. And also because all organisations have specific things in their business plan about audience development and about who the work is for and who they engage with and some of their priorities, because alas, you can't be all things to all people. So everyone's got a focus. London organisations tend to be much more focused, and regional ones tend to be a bit broader, but often they'll want to speak directly to their local community in some capacity. So the more you've considered how the audience factor into your pitch, the better, and who your work is for. And if you tell me it's for everybody, that's great. But do you have like a primary audience, a secondary audience, and a tertiary audience? Do you have like a kind of sense of who might really want to come and see your show? The second thing is people tend to pitch to me themes, not story. And so, for example, lots of people pitch, they say a show about mental health, and that's brilliant. And it's a theme I feel really passionately about for lots of reasons, but it doesn't tell me anything about the work. Like Phantom of the Opera, you could say is a show about mental health. King Lear can be a show about mental health, but actually I'm interested in the plot and your take on it, or the concept and your take on it if it's less kind of narratively structured. So really just getting a sense of the detail. That's more about kind of pitching your elevator pitch. So story, who's it for, scale, rough sense of sort of stylistically what you're thinking about, and genre. And if it's a meeting, it's come with some asks, or come with some questions, and like let's figure it out together, and also be really upfront about what you don't know, or what you don't know. So like just say if you don't understand something, if there's terminology, and I promise you no one will think that you should know. And it's the thing I wish I could say to my 22-year-old self is like, it's okay not to know how this works. Just ask the question, because then someone can explain it to you. It's okay to come up front and go, I'm really good at this bit over here, but this bit is, I don't understand it, and I feel really out of my depth. And I think sometimes when some of the mental health stuff and some of our personal kind of fallout happens, can often be around that area of insecurity, of feeling like everyone knows this thing and you're on the outside of it. And I promise you, nearly everyone I know in the arts who looks confident, it's just because they've kind of reconciled themselves to the fact they're making it up as they go, and they just get better at it.
Yeah, yeah, I think that too, Beth. Ralph, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I really agree with that second point about being really clear what your asks are, because often when you're approached for a meeting and it's just somebody wanting to have a chat with you about their work, you're sometimes working at a venue conscious about not knowing whether or not you can actually help, and you don't want to take up anyone's time. You don't want to take up a freelancer's time if you don't have anything that you can offer them in terms of support or whatever. So I think being really clear about what your asks are, and not being kind of shy about asking for the support that you need. What is your idea? What do you need to make it happen? Can you give that to me? If you can't, direct me in the other way, because in another direction, because often if it's not BA's Battersea Arts Centre or one of our partners that can help, we often can give advice to artists for other venues or avenues to explore. So sometimes it could just be about signposting people to other opportunities that we're aware about that that are available. So I think just being super clear about what your ask is really helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's really useful to mention that venues, you don't need to think that venues don't expect you to only work with them. So it is likely that they could go, oh, you know what, it's not right for us, but we do know that these guys over here, that would really suit working with them. So that's really valuable. Teunkie, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say, and this possibly applies maybe more once you're a little further up the ladder. Doesn't need to be very far, but the best way generally to get to know artists is through their work. And that doesn't need to be, huge big shows in big established venues. That can be a scratch night. That can be a script. That can be a reading. We will go to as many of those as we go to shows, as in shows that have full runs at bigger venues. But the best way to get to know you is through your work. So do keep inviting people to stuff. And I know that can sometimes feel, and I've definitely felt that myself, it can feel like a thankless experience to have to keep writing and keep inviting people, and they don't respond or they don't show up, and you keep doing it. But the thing is, we do see it. We do see the invitations. We do read them. And it also helps us track the development of people. If they invite us to this thing and a year later to that thing, we go, okay, they've gone from there to there. Now they're doing this. But the best way to get to know artists is through their work. And when you approach venues, and maybe this is unique to me or to the venue I work for, not for everyone, but I'm much more interested in what you have to say about your work than what the critics have to say about it. There's no point, honestly, in you emailing me loads of press reviews and stars and all that kind of stuff, because I'm like, yeah, that's what somebody else says about your work. I mean, great if you get them, well done, but that honestly is not going to make any difference in me deciding whether or not to come and see your show. And especially if what you're doing is, putting on a scratch night of something that might not get reviewed, well, then, it would be very unfair to tip the balance towards the stuff that gets written about. Keep inviting people, and honesty. Oh yeah, the other thing, sorry, very quickly to tag on to that, because the best way to get to know you is through your work. That's also your currency, is the finished projects you have, or again, finished can also be a scratch night, but it's the stuff that you make. I don't know if any of you are interested in writing, for instance. Honestly, there is no shortage of writers who have written 25% of a play. We are interested in the writers that have written the play, because it shows the tenacity and it shows the drive. So when when you start writing, actually, whether it's a play or a screenplay or a funding application or an approach, whatever it is, that just get to the end of it. Your first draft of whatever you're writing is just get to the end of the thing, and then rewrite and change and adapt. But honestly, there is no shortage of people with 25% of a play. There are very few people who've written 100% of a play.
Yeah, I think one of the things is always finishing. trying to finish something, and then also getting those asks in. And actually, if you've got like the whole thing of a play, then yeah, you can work, even if you think it's not perfect, but it's the whole thing, you can work on it with those partner venues. Like maybe they'll have, but you need to kind of have that relationship already. Laura, do you want to speak about this? And you might be thinking about the perspective of the artists that you work with specifically as well, I suppose, with Graeae in your career.
Yeah, the thing that came straight to my head with this question was, if you have access requirements, be clear about those and don't be concerned about voicing them. So if you are approaching a theatre and there's something that you need to make that meeting, whether it's on Zoom or telephone or in real, face to face, hallelujah when we can do that. If there's something that will make that process work better for you and allow you to present yourself in the best way, then be clear about that and don't be concerned. If you are concerned, then maybe talk to somebody, an ally, a friend, a peer, a colleague about whatever it is, to get some other thoughts and perspectives on how you might present what your access requirements are. I think being very familiar with what works for you is really important. And I would say the same with an elevator pitch. I'm absolutely hopeless at elevator pitches. As you've gathered from today, I can't edit myself very well at all. So I find them really difficult. But what I try and hone in on is the one thing that excites me about this project. What is it that makes me want to do this project? And hone in on that, because I'm more likely to be able to talk about that with confidence than I am about an element I'm less sure about or less interested in. So I might be less interested in kind of the statistics around a particular piece of work, but I'm interested in who it is that I'm producing this work for, who this work is, and what that audience is. And I would also say, if you're approaching a theatre and you are talking to them about the audiences and who is going to see this work and who this work is for, again, be really clear about how that's going to happen. So if, for example, your work, a lot of the work I've done over the last 20 years has been for deaf and disabled audiences. They've been for children and families with complex access requirements. So if I'm going to someone to say, this is the work that I want to do and this is the audience, I think I need to be clear on how I'm going to make that possible for that audience. So it's not just a case of, this is the audience that I want to reach and this is who I think will want to see this work. Well, how is that going to happen? How is that going to be possible? Yeah, that's probably all I'd say.
No, that's great, Laura. That's really great. So Sam, I know Sam dropped out for a second because of the internet gods, that it happens. So Sam, we're just still talking about when meeting possible organisations, what are the things that artists should prepare, or what are top tips for kind of elevator pitches? Was there anything you wanted to add in terms of when you've been speaking to venues, or the theatre that you work at as well, or anything?
I don't think I've got a huge amount to add as to what's already been said. I think the difference between an artist in my head and, say, an actor is that sort of a passion and drive that you bring into your projects. And as the lead artist or whatever it is, whatever role you've got in a project, I think it's really important to convey that passion
to venues and possible partners, because we do see a lot of people, and you kind of get a sense of whether. So for me, an actor is somebody who shows up, is really interested in the project whilst they're doing, and then leaves and never thinks about it again, you know, because you can't, because you're an actor, whatever, you're busy. And an artist is somebody who's kind of living and breathing the work, and it's you know, it's their raison d'etre almost. And I think you do get a sense as a venue, and I always try, if I'm meeting with new collaborators or whatever, is to convey the passion and yeah, don't worry if you mess up your words or forget things, because everybody's human. Remember that in the industry, they might seem like, you know, gods or superhumans, but literally everybody's been at the beginning, and everybody wants other people to do well, I think. So yeah, try not to be too nervous.
I think that's a really great point. Just remember that everyone is people too. And actually it was really great hearing people's stories from before as well, because it just reminds us as well that wherever people are placed now, that we're all just people. So actually just having a chat is very possible, and you shouldn't be shy to do that. Or yeah, so that's really great. Thank you, Sam. Ruby, did you have anything to add on this one?
Just to say, I think also like what to ask, but also who to bring or who to ask. So like for Milk Presents, we're a company of different artists, and like sometimes I know that I could go to a meeting and spend an hour talking about a project, but I know that actually if I bring Leo, our artistic director, and they speak for just 10 minutes really passionately about the show and maybe read a little bit of what they've been writing, actually that's going to make the venue so much more interesting than if I talk about it for an hour. So I think sort of thinking about who do you have on your team, what do you want to convey, what's important for this meeting, maybe you want to bring the designer along with you, or maybe you know thinking about all those different assets and what's the most important thing to convey. So just thinking about who's on your team and who's actually the most appropriate person to have that meeting is really important. And also going back to what Laura was saying about access requirements, and I know that in the past, like some of the people in our team are neurodivergent, and it's been like challenging a lot of that. We use the term, do you want to go for a coffee, which is like this sort of like catch-all phrase, and I know that quite often some of our team have struggled with like, what do they mean by that? What am I expected to do for that coffee? Like, and actually it's okay to like, you know, I'm now really clear about, yeah, I'd love to have a conversation with you, love to have a virtual coffee or whatever, but could you let us know what it is that you would be hoping to get out of the meeting, if that ask has come from them, or if you've got things that you want to get out of it. It's okay to set that agenda beforehand and be really clear about that, because otherwise I know especially there's often a power imbalance between venue and artist, and so if you're sat there thinking, oh god, I don't know if I prepared the right things for this meeting, I didn't know this was going to be a meeting about this project, I thought it was about something else and I haven't thought about all of those things. So yeah, it's really good to be clear and upfront about those things. And also if you get offered a free coffee, take it. Like, it's always nice to have a free drink, and yeah, I think definitely, yeah, I always say yes to those things. If it's a venue, if it's another artist or whatever, not the same, but yeah, if it's on their tab, take it.
Yeah, when it's on the tab, every time. Yeah. That's great. Thank you so much, Ruby. So I was wondering, moving on a little bit, what do you think that the barriers for new artists are today, and how can we work at addressing them? So that's a bit of a different question, and we're going to come back to some of these other questions in a little bit, but I just wondered, what do you think the barriers are to new artists today, and how, as a whole, everyone, how can we work on addressing them? I'm going to ask Beth, are you happy to kick us off with this one?
Oh, it's a tricky one, isn't it, at the moment? What are the key barriers? I think one of the key barriers often is people's internal monologue about permission, and about, do you have permission to do this? Am I experienced enough? Do I fit this bracket? What's expected of me? There's I think artists increasingly have a really strong dialogue. And it's quite interesting because I think a lot of that has been played out on Twitter more publicly at the moment. And because artists are really creative, subtext can be invented, which becomes a real barrier. Like, they didn't reply to my email saying, hate my work. is a classic kind of invisible barrier, invisible thing that you've created. So one of the things I would really go is in that dialogue is, do I have evidence for that? What does this boil down to in a question? What is the bit of me that's stopping me take the step forward that I need to make this thing happen? Who might I ask? And I think sometimes the other barrier that I think is that we tend to look at what we don't have rather than what we do have. And I think I began sitting down when I was struggling quite a few years ago, and I began going, what have I got that I can bring to the table? Like, what relationships do I have? What access to resources do I have? Like, I'm the daughter of a vicar, which means I had a phenomenal network of church halls, which were rehearsal spaces. And I was like, wow, I've got this whole thing that I have that I can share as a resource with other people. So sometimes it's like, what resources have you got? Who's in your arsenal? What relationships do you hold? Who do you know? And then you can work out what you don't have, but what can you do with what you've got? Because the answer will always be, I need more money, always. That's at any level of any theatre industry, so that's a given. But what are the other things? And just try and break it down a little bit, and then look at what you have got, because it will make you feel less disempowered and more able to walk in your own authority. And the other thing is, sometimes there's a bit of a parent-child thing gets played out in the arts around power. I think you should remember that you are a fellow adult in a fellow work situation. And it is okay to be you, and it's okay to be all the unique and brilliant things that you are. And I think sometimes not accepting that can be a real barrier to moving forward. I think that's, yeah.
Cool, thank you, Beth. Ruby, what do you think? Or do you have anything to add? Or
yeah, I mean, I think in some ways the barriers in the arts, especially starting out, is always money a lot of the time. And I know that sounds like an obvious and boring answer, but it is difficult. It is challenging. It's challenging as an independent artist working outside of a venue to support yourself, to make that art. And it's challenging to get commissions. It's challenging to get funding. So I just think that is a real barrier. It always has been, and in some ways it probably is even more challenging now, I think, with the kind of competitions for funds that we're facing. So I think, you know, like, you're not alone if you're struggling to make money from your art. And I used to talk about it a lot when I did artist development mentoring sessions, of sort of like, I used sort of seeing as like, you know, at one point all the money that I earned was outside of the arts, and none of the money I earned was within the arts. And then slowly, like, it started to kind of do this, where it sort of like was a bit of a seesaw, and then eventually it started to creep into that. And now, you know, now actually I'm incredibly lucky to be fully employed within the arts. And it's just, yeah, I just think like money is always challenging, and it still is. Even for, you know, Milk Presents, we're still a project funding company. We still go through periods where we look and we say, hey, we're not going to have any money within the company for the next 3 months, and we need to be looking elsewhere for our work. And it's just always a challenge. And I think when you're not a regularly funded venue, even when you are a regularly funded venue, holding on to that money is really challenging. And so I just think that, well, it's always a struggle. But I think if we're honest and open about it with each other, and we're open about where we are with that, and ask for help, and don't try to sort of pretend that we're maybe making more than we are, or, you know, sort of having those honest and being honest and open about that conversation. When someone says, oh, you know, how much does your show cost? We only have this much money. Then saying, well, I'm sorry, I'm afraid our show costs more than that, and we can't do it if that's all you have. Kind of being honest and open about your costs and your fees, and not sort of trying to pretend that you can make things happen out of nowhere if you can't. But yeah, that sounds a bit of a like negative, boring answer, but I think it is always a challenge. But yeah, I agree with a lot of what Beth said as well. Is just sort of like, a lot of your barriers are within your own heads as well, but there are some also real barriers, I think, and lots of things around sort of just the general culture and landscape of theatre, and kind of who's in charge, what the people in charge look like, what backgrounds they come from, the routes that they've had into theatres. All of those things can also be barriers for people who don't necessarily have the same backgrounds or experiences as well. So I think continuing to making sure that people who are in positions of not necessarily, I don't want to use the word power, but it kind of in those positions where you think they have kind of budgets and capacity to do things, to make sure more and more that those people are representing lots of different people, I think also helps to break down those barriers for people as well.
Yeah, I think that's really good point to bring up. And Sam, you mentioned some of that in your introduction as well, and how yeah, so would you like to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think, I mean, unfortunately, there are a lot more barriers than there are opportunities, I think, and a lot of them are in your own head. Being able to take knockbacks without it massively affecting your mental health or making you feel like you're less of a human because you didn't get this commission or that funding, or is really difficult. But it was a big thing for me for quite a while, that because I wasn't in those groups, I didn't have the language that the industry uses, and is quite I'd say it makes you feel like you don't belong there when you don't know the language. Unfortunately for me, I'm quite academic, so I really picked up the language quite quickly and was able to assimilate it. But I don't see why I had to do that. Why isn't the language more accessible to everybody, or the applications, just the process of applying, why aren't they more accessible to people whose communications issues, might not have strong written communication skills or whatever. So, don't feel as though just because you don't know the terminology or whatever, you can't speak in funding application speak, that it makes you less of a person. It's the system that's broken, not you. I would say barriers into the theatre, oh my gosh, it's very not what you know, it's who you know, in my opinion. And that can be a good thing if you know the right people, and a very bad thing if you don't know anybody. So I think us as venues need to make sure that we don't use the same artists on every project just because we know them and we like them, and whatever. It's risky for venues and for artistic directors to use new people, because with new people can come a whole world of problems, and you do get bad experiences. But I think it shouldn't stop us tapping into people that we don't know. And don't worship the theatre as a building. Yeah, theatres are amazing. They used to be like my churches when I was a child. I'd do anything to stand on a professional stage in front of a full audience and do a show. But you know what? At the end of the day, looking back now, I think if I'd have done a show in a high street with 10 people watching me, I still would get that same rush of adrenaline and that same feeling afterwards. So like Beth said, village halls, crikey, and what Hannah was saying earlier, get some mates round, write a show, do it in a village hall. Stop worshipping these buildings like they are the be all and end all of theatre, because they're not. And we need a revolution to change that, I think. But I won't go on. But funding applications, you just have to, I don't know, find somebody to do one for you, pay somebody to do it, I don't know. And don't fund everything yourself and make yourself poor like I did, because that's damaging to your mental health and your savings, if you have any. Just because you want to make work, you're quite willing to not eat for a week so that you can do this. Don't do it. Get somebody else to pay. Thank you.
Yeah, do that. Like, feed yourself. Yeah, I know. It sounds like, Ralph, from what you were talking about before, your BAC are really like focusing in on how to break down some of these barriers in terms of audience. Can you speak on like what you're doing as well for artists, a little bit from what you were saying before?
Yeah, I think we're yeah, I can't sort of add anything to what Beth and Sam and Ruby have just said in terms of the kind of invisible but also very like real barriers that there are existing for artists to sort of access venues. I mean, in terms of how, yeah, specifically about what BAC are trying to do to kind of address that, I think it's first of all about transparency. So we're trying to be more transparent this is something that venues are always talking about, like we need to be more transparent, but we're working with an associate, and we're basically trying to work towards the next sort of 6 months, trying to be as completely transparent about how all of our finances operate, and publish all of these details, and be transparent about how we program, how to contact us, how to submit an expression of interest, but also to try and take the kind of labor away from freelancers to have to do all the research and have to do all of the work in order to kind of start a conversation with us. So yeah, I'd say it's first and foremost it's about transparency, and then I guess the other thing is about pathways. So there are so many different ways in which you can kind of arrive at a venue. You can be a participant in a project. You can arrive through a kind of like a scratch night or something like that. You can arrive through an email or a phone call. You can arrive through working on the bar or any other aspect of the organisation. People approach venues in different ways. And I think we're trying to, again, be clear about what the different pathways are, and also create more avenues for early career artists to kind of present work with us in a kind of low risk environment. So it's about that, and it's also about trying to better support artists financially as well. So we've scrapped box office splits and financial deals that kind of put the risk on artists instead of venues, and we're trying to we're working towards a model now where it's pay what you can. So BAC are taking the financial risk, and if we don't sell a show, if we don't sell a high number of tickets, then we absorb that loss, and we'll be paying straight fees from now on, and trying to be more upfront and honest about what we can and can't afford. So yeah, those are some of the areas that we're working on. But I mean, one thing I would say is that venues are like desperately trying, like a lot of the time, to like be more kind of welcoming to artists. So I think in a way, like, you know, you can be more like demanding and just sort of I think when I started working in theatre, I was always so nervous about approaching people, being like, you know, they're not going to want to talk to me, or they're not going to want to help. But actually people are really keen to help. So I think, you need to just don't be afraid to kind of approach venues and ask for what you want, tell them what you want.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. And it sounds like you're doing some really great stuff as well, like, which is really useful for the artists to know, I think, when they're thinking about who to approach and different things for their work. Teunkie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
So I think one of the main barriers is not seeing people with whom you share a background, either in positions of power, positions of gatekeeping, or simply on the stage. So I think, or in the, in the audience around you. I think that's one of the big barriers, and with that comes a barrier of not knowing that this could be something that you can be doing. So I think there's a huge responsibility for people working in the arts to make transparent what their jobs are, what they do, what is possible for you. And, I think as a sector, for instance, we're missing out on a huge amount of not just onstage talent, but also backstage talent who simply would not consider the theatre an area in which they could work. I think we're missing a lot of, I think we're at risk of losing the possibility of creating a more diverse and representative theatre culture because we're simply not open about that this exists as a possibility. And that's, talking to people in secondary schools about, like, have you considered, so, like, for instance, stage management? It's not just about the people who are on stage. The other thing I think that is hugely problematic, and this is indeed systemic, is that a lot of ways into the industry are based on received and traditional models of recruitment that are carried over from other fields, which might not be appropriate for the theatre. And that comes with things like overemphasizing a written application process, the form of which naturally skews the balance in favor of people from certain economic and educational backgrounds and often regional class backgrounds. And I think especially every publicly funded institution has a huge responsibility to break that down. And whether that means moving away from the written application, moving away from formats of application that are more in keeping with how the artists wish to present themselves, wish to present the ideas for their work. And I think we need to be very open to that, and we need to keep embracing different possibilities of meeting people there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Laura, did you want to add anything else?
No, I agree with everything everyone said. I suppose the only thing which is bothers me about the question is that in the world we live in right now, with the pandemic and the destruction that it's wrought over people's lives, physically, emotionally, and financially, there's a lot of barriers we don't know yet. And there's a lot of things that have turned what was really good work upside down and inside out. And certainly for deaf and disabled practitioners and creatives, there's a whole layer of threat, physical threat, which wasn't there before, that is there now. And for many of the people that Graeae work with, a lot of our creatives, even just leaving home and being able to go places in person is not going to be a reality for some time still. And I think, well, that all sounds very, sounds very depressing. I think the good thing is that people are open to the fact that there is still things under the floorboards that we don't know yet because of the pandemic. And I think a lot of venues are being very willing and open to address things as they come up that they weren't expecting, which is good, really, which is really encouraging. And I think things like the 7 principles that many arts organisations and venues have signed up to, which are the principles of inclusion as we come out of the pandemic, to ensure that all the great work that's been done, in this case around deaf and disabled inclusion, but which I think stretches beyond that to the work that Ralph was talking about around economy and so on. Those 7 principles really, I think, will really help us as an industry to ensure that the good work that's been done and the progress that was being made and the thought processes that people were going through aren't forgotten and lost because of the terrible tragedy that has befallen us all now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to bring up, and I'm really conscious of time and your guys' time, and we're going to have to draw it to a close soon. I wonder if you have 1 more minute. An artist has put a question in the question box, and I feel like that is a great thing. And it's a really practical question. So I'm gonna see if we have just like a few minutes just to answer that. Not everyone needs to answer it. But I think it's a useful one to know. So this is, could you ask which sort of material they would like to see when someone they don't know writes to them? Marketing pack, full recording, short recording, what to send at first, and what to have prepared in the background, how it visually could be presented. So this is a really practical question, which I'm gonna throw over to Ruby, because I think, Ruby, you'd be great at answering this question, if you don't mind, like in terms of when you're putting those things together for Milk, what do you tend to send?
I think it depends on what we like. Again, what has been said before, like what do we want out of this email? Is it that we want a show programmed? Is it that we just want to begin in a relationship? Is it that we want a commission? So think about the intention first. So don't just generically send a tour back if actually what you're talking about is running like an engagement and participation project with them. So just sort of, that seems obvious, but worth checking in with yourself about first. And then yeah, I mean, I would always include like Beth and I think Teunkie have said, sort of like what is the show or the idea or the thing, like not just in themes or whatever, but be really specific, and that can be in the form of like a tour pack or a marketing pack, but just, you know, it can also be in the body of an email. Quite often I put like the key things in the body of the email first, because even getting to the point of somebody opening an attachment might not happen. So sort of having the kind of the key USPs about the project, about the team, about what it is you're trying to achieve and what your ask is, like in that email, is really important. And then of course attach however much you think will sell it. I think after a certain point you can send too much information, so don't send every single production shot that you've got, don't send every single review, like send your best 5 images that show the kind of the depth of the piece, that show the, you know, the different elements of that show. Or send, you know, don't, if the quality of the footage that you've got from a rehearsed reading or from a scratch or from the show even isn't that great, maybe spend some time just making a short, like taking the best bit of that and then saying, and here's the script or whatever. Like really think about, like, you don't want to curate too much, but think about like how much time this person is going to have and what is going to like pique their interest to then have a further conversation with you about it. So I don't think there's any like hard and fast rules, but I think definitely having something visual always really helps. I think having something in the body of the email that like grabs attention, and then having your asks really clear. So yeah, I don't think there's a formula like always send a marketing pack or always send a production pack, or I mean those things are very similar as well. So think about kind of what do you mean when you're sending a production pack, what's the essence of it, what do you want to get out of it. But yeah, that would be my like quick snapshot answer to that. But I'm sure some of the people that are currently working within venues might have some interesting inputs.
Beth, did you want to add to that one? What?
I would just say, if you don't know them, keep it really reasonably brief. I think sometimes I get bombarded with quite a lot of information. It's just a lot to absorb. And some people are really different at this, but I don't need it to look pretty. I'm more interested in the information than whether it's been beautifully in a marketing pack. But yeah, I think what Ruby said was great. Just keep it short and sweet and really clear what you want and what you're bringing to the table, and that's great.
Teunkie?
Yeah, there isn't really a one-size-fits-all answer to it, because it really depends on what it is that you want to get out of it, sort of in line with what Ruby said. So attune what you send in to what you want to get out of it. So, you know, if it is a first approach to a venue because you're a practitioner and you want them to be interested in your work, like if you've got a 2-minute reel of some interesting stuff, that is enough. It's just like to kickstart a conversation somewhere. If it is because you want a literary department to take a look at your play, you know, follow the procedures for sending in the play. They should have them on their website about, you know, if they have a literary department that looks after those kinds of things. So just sort of, attune it to the specific thing you want to get out of it. I think it's is most important, and it sits with Ruby's point about being really, and with Beth's point actually about being really clear what the ask is.
Yeah, I would agree on that too. Sam, did you have anything to add?
I like a link that I can click. So maybe one strong image, some bullet points about the show, because I will just scan the email. You know, or don't write paragraphs of stuff, because I'll know within, you know, 30 seconds if I'm going to click on the link. But I you know, a link to a YouTube video or anything that I can have a look at and I can have on one monitor whilst I'm still reading other emails on another monitor. And if you're lucky enough to have a review or two, stick that in. But we know instantly whether a show is going to do well at a particular venue. So and I am quite visual as a person, so anything, you know, visual, but not too much information, because then you just switch off.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Ralph, did you have anything to add?
No, I literally think the way Ruby put it was perfect. Yeah, I think yeah, and also I agree, a link, something quick. Yeah.
Laura, did you have anything to add at all?
No, I don't think so. I think it's all been very eloquently put. The briefer, the better, would be my advice.
Excellent. Cool. Well, I am aware that we have run over a little bit and you guys are really busy. And thank you so much for taking the time for talking to us and answering some questions about how to get into theatre. Some people have put their details in the chat box, so I'll draw the artist's attention to that. So please do copy down those emails if you want to ask further questions. There's loads of stuff that we didn't have a chance to go into. I do think that Laura's inclusion of talking about the pandemic and leading out of the pandemic would be a really amazing thing for us to go into, but we just don't have time today. So hopefully at some other point, well, I'm sure there'll be loads of articles and different things that you can read about that, and we can keep that conversation going on. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your expertise and your wisdom, everyone who has been involved today, and we'll draw that to a close. So thank you, everyone. And we've got loads of thanks that are coming in the chat box from everyone, which is really lovely to see. And we will finish it there. It's always funny finishing, isn't it? Like, we will finish.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for chatting.
Thank you, Olwen, for hosting so well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Virtual round of applause.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.